Hello and welcome to Attacking Third, a CBS Sports Soccer podcast. I'm Sandra and Herrera, lead NWSL writer for CBS Sports, joined today, as always, by my colleague and co-host Lisa Roman, broadcaster and analyst for CBS Sports. On today's episode, we're going to be doing a midweek recap of the Washington Spirit versus Portland Thorns and a weekend preview of NWSL matches. And we're going to chat a little bit about some breaking news as well. But before we get into all that, thanks everybody for joining us live. You can watch all our episodes and exclusive interviews on YouTube. So go ahead and subscribe to our page to get notified whenever we go live at youtube.com/attacking3rd. And thank you to everyone for voting us in the for the People's Choice Podcast Awards. Thanks to all of you who have advanced. We've advanced to the final round, and that means we need your help a little bit more now than ever. So the preliminary voting was for nominations, and this is for all the marbles, quite frankly. So if you voted for us before, check your email, because about a third of you will be getting an email asking you to vote for the final round. So check your spam folders for an email with the subject line Podcast Awards Final Slate Voting. And you can vote for Attacking Third to win the best female hosted podcast. Thank you all so much. We got to get into it, Lisa. This is going to be a little bit of a lengthier episode just because of some of the things we got to chat about, a game to recap, a ton of games to preview, but some breaking news as well. Let's start with that. How are you doing today?
I'm good. There's definitely a lot happening. We were actually supposed to go live a little bit earlier than we planned. Then some breaking news happened. We had to collect ourselves
We had to
little.
reset.
Yeah, we had to collect ourselves, reset, change this thumbnail. I was like, hold on, I need to change some things because there is breaking news in the NWSL.
Yeah, so we'll just jump right into that news coming out of New Jersey, New York, Gotham FC. The club announced that both Gotham and Scott Parkinson have decided to part ways at this time during the season. Quite frankly, the timing of this, I think, Lisa, you and I were chatting a little bit as we were again going through the reset of the episode. We were talking a little bit about the timing of this and it happening now, and if this was something that was maybe surprising for some folks, or maybe one of these things where it just sort of felt like the writing was on the wall.
Yeah, this is maybe I'm surprised at the timing of it, and that is something that you and I said, but not at all surprised, because when you look at really where Gotham is in the standings and how they've done this year, and really even when you go back to the preseason and our preseason predictions of Gotham, we expected them to do great things. They had added Christy Mewis, U.S. international midfielder, to their roster, and just done so many things there with a little bit of moving pieces, adding Ali Krieger, Ashlyn Harris into the mix. But Gotham, they're in 11th place in the standings right now. They've got 12 matches played, and they're 4-8 with a negative 15 goal differential. 3 straight losses they're coming off of. The games that they have won haven't been that pretty. Frankly, it's been scrappy wins, getting them here and there, and it's been a lot of question marks. Even listeners and people that join us live in our chat are saying, what can they do better? What can they do better? And it's really, they've been so defensive. They really haven't been on the attacking end. And I don't actually think it has too much to do with Scott Parkinson and himself. Yeah. He was with Chicago for years, and as a coach, players love him. And that's been the resounding words and phrases that have continued to be out as this news has fallen, saying that it was really a decision that the team made that was very difficult for both Gotham and for Scott Parkinson, because he is so well liked within the organization. But it just came down to a mutual agreement and a benefit for both sides to kind of undergo this change. Now, at this point in the season, it's a little interesting that this change comes now, with Gotham playing 12 games already. They still have about a third of their season left to go in this regular season. So at this time, how quickly are they going to get another coach? Kind of what the next steps are there are a little bit uncertain. But at this point, I think it's pretty safe to say, I think it was reported by Jenna Tonelli, that assistant coaches Bev Yanez and Becky Tweed will be leading training for Gotham until an interim head coach is named.
I mean, yeah, that sounds about right, quite frankly, because within the statement, there's it reads as if it's like a mutual parting of ways, an agreement on both sides here going into place effective immediately. They're going to eventually name a head coach, but they plan on going, according to the statement, they will go through a methodical process of identifying and interviewing a talented and diverse pool of candidates to serve as head coach for the 2023 season. And an interim head coach will be announced shortly. So this coming midweek, I think is, I think that's where I'm alluding to in terms of the timing of it. But I would imagine that conversations around something like this, they wanted to perhaps get it right, in terms of agreeing to part ways and figuring out things like, and termination of contracts, severance, et cetera, stuff like that. But I'm just thinking about like, where this club was perhaps like a year ago. It's almost an official year to the date where this club brought on Scott Parkinson, in
so
kind of a mid-season capacity.
Sandra, I had the same thought. August 24th is when Gotham announced that head coach Freya Coombe would be leaving after their most recent game to go to Angel City because she had already accepted the head coaching position at Angel City. That was August 24th. This news drops on August 11th. So yeah, about 1 year.
Yeah. And, it's this is a team that, kind of found themselves in a position last year where they needed to, go through a vetting process of getting a new head coach. They had another mutual parting of ways with their former head coach and Freya Coombe, who ultimately was tagged as the eventual head coach of Angel City FC. And just due to the optics of that, and the fact that she would eventually have to be doing scouting and navigating the team through things like an expansion draft and signing of players, that the conflict was much greater than perhaps the pros of allowing her to finish with the team. So they, again, a mutual parting of ways. And then this is how Parkinson got brought on into the club, but also like fleshing out their coaching staff. Quite frankly, having a Bev Yanez or a Becky Tweed, within this collective coaching staff. And I think there was a lot of excitement about what this team could do in 2022 because they went on an incredible run as this coaching staff got put into place. They were undefeated to sort of close out that 2021 season. They punched their ticket to the playoffs for the first time in many years for this East Coast franchise. And I think we'll just narrow it down to Tacky Third for you and I kind of covering NWSL and by extension, this team, like previewing the offseason, taking a look at what they were doing. We wanted to see more from this Gotham FC side. And we had anticipated that they would possibly take that next step, that this would be the year that we would see them kind of take that next step. It wasn't going to be something where they kind of barely made it to the playoffs. This was a team that needed some help as well in those final couple of weeks with results on other across the league. And that's that little sort of decision day weekend that occurred. But we wanted to see, this team kind of take that next step, get the convincing wins, be top four instead of, just sort of inching your way in there a little bit. And we just didn't see that happen. They had an off season that was perhaps somewhat challenging, but you have to look at the landscape of the league. Every other club had to prepare for a double expansion year. So we're looking at things like you're losing not just Kaylin Sheridan, but you lose Dee Dee Heritage. You make a move for somebody like Christy Mewis to try to make that addition there. You bring in a couple of veterans in Ali Krieger and Ashton Harris.
Michelle Bedos.
I just wonder a little bit if maybe those moves were aren't panning out the way that they thought they would. I think you and I, when we've been watching this Gotham team in 2022, there's definitely been some moments where we're very, very early on. I think going back to even the Challenge Cup, where we were watching this team and we were just kind of like, okay, a little unclear about the identity, right, of this Gotham FC team. And that was a question that continued to linger throughout the duration of the Challenge Cup, throughout that entire first half of the NWSL regular season. And I think that even now, with this decision, that's still a question I think that people are asking of this Gotham's like, who is this team? What is their identity? And I mean, like on the pitch, I think there's a lot of folks that look at this Gotham team and they say, okay, like there's a lot of talented players here. It looks like they have fun off of the pitch, love the fashion, game day, walkways.
But that doesn't get you points on.
But then you're looking at stuff on the pitch and nobody really has a clear, concrete answer for that.
And that stuff doesn't get you points on the pitch. And I think that the club overall is making strides to be a top-notch club, right? They rebranded last year from Sky Blue to Gotham. They've grown in ownership, most recently announcing Sue Bird of the WNBA joining the ranks in this one, as well as Eli Manning, NFL player, joining part of the ownership group. So they're making these steps and these strides to be an incredible club. And frankly, at this point in the season, yes, it's the beginning of August. We're entering match day 14 this weekend in the NWSL, but Gotham's only played 12 matches. They have 18 games to go. That's still a lot of games. And if they can get a head coach in, an interim coach in, say in the next week, maybe not by this weekend, but say in the next week, that can maybe turn things around. Like Gotham still has a shot at playoffs at this point. So the fact that this change mathematically, yes.
Okay.
Just because they've only played 12 games. You look at other teams, Washington
they've got
Spirit,
like 5 games in hand over everyone else.
Literally 5 games in hand. And that might be the saving grace for Gotham, because right now in the standings, Washington Spirit and Gotham both have 12 points. They sit 10th and 11th respectively, Washington and then Gotham. But Washington has played 16 games and Gotham has only played 12.
I love numbers. You love numbers, right? We love the stats.
Not great at them, but I do
love them. We love the data, right? So mathematically, yes.
Yeah.
New Jersey, New York, Gotham FC squad are technically still in position to pull off a miracle and try to make the playoffs again. So let's talk hypothetically then instead. Do you think right now at this current state that this team as constructed, as they currently play their soccer games week to week, are going to make a run and go to the playoffs? I'll go first.
My gut says no.
No.
My gut says no too, but mathematically they could do it. I think as much as I say it's not fully Scott Parkinson's fault, I'm not going to take all blame off of him. He's the head coach. He's making the decisions and the player rotation and running the training sessions. But there's also assistant coaches and a lot of other personnel there. It's not fully his fault, but it's also not completely not his fault. So maybe it depends on who they bring into this situation, but how much can they really turn this around? Like, I think maybe this could be the shakeup that the players need. Frankly, we talked about it. Bringing in Ashlyn Harris, Ali Krieger, Christy Mewis. They've got Mitch Purse up top. They've got Paige Monahan, who's done a lot. They've got Zerboni in the midfield. Like, they have pieces, and maybe this is the shakeup they need. Maybe this has been the conversation for the last few weeks. Hey, how is Scott doing? Do we like him? What's happening here? And I mean, who knows? Gotham plays this weekend. We'll kind of see how it pans out in that sense. But who's going to be the fill-in?
Yeah, no, that's the big burning question, right? I think maybe we got to try to answer that one next. I think at this point of the season, you got to give it a bet. You got to give it to Yanez. You got to let Tweed continue on. You got to let them try to finish out this season. Quite frankly, I understand that they're going to be doing, what do they refer to it as, a very, very lengthy, methodical vetting process for a head coach in 2023. And that's great. Start now with that. Start now. Do it now for 2023. I just think you got to roll with the duo that are there right now. They're leading the trainings now.
I agree. Frankly, I agree completely with Yanez stepping in. I mean, you look at Houston when they lost former head coach James Clarkson and he was put on suspension. Sarah Loudon stepped in and she turned that Houston team around a few months ago and started racking up wins and getting points. So I agree that the assistants know how it's been happening, and they've also seen what hasn't worked over the last several months, and they can make those changes. I'm going to throw another name out there. Mark Parsons, former head coach of Portland Thorns. He went to Netherlands. He was let go from the Netherlands head coaching manager position. Will he come back to the NWSL? I don't think yet, but I wouldn't put it in the question for 2023. I wouldn't.
No. I've seen Mark Parsons coach Mitch Perch before, and I don't want to see it again. So I like the idea. I think naturally, because it's a big name, it's a name with
It's a name.
experience. It's a name period that I think people might think that. But honestly, like with all respect to Mark Parsons, I mean, he's someone who also made a decision for himself as well. I mean, the whole point of leaving NWSL was, yes, it was a great opportunity to try to coach at the international level with a very good team in the Netherlands. But also a way to get back home technically to Europe.
Yeah.
Coaches want those things for themselves as well, not just the players, who
I
want to
agree.
try to make those moves for themselves. So I don't know if he would make that move, for himself or with his family, quite frankly.
I think that's a
But
great
also,
point because he did want to get home. But
yeah,
do you
I
think
also think it's going to depend a lot on, who Gotham want to identify.
they would reach out to him and be like, "Hey, Parsons"?
I think that Gotham is going to be the ones being reached out to. I think that they're going to be the ones flooded with a lot of interest. I don't know if they're going to have to be casting those nets as wide as they need to. Listen, this is a franchise. I'm reiterating. I think I'm going in circles here. This is a franchise that people are going to want to be
Yes,
a part
totally.
of. They went through their rebrand. They're announcing almost like new investorship within their franchise. Constantly, it almost feels like. And listen, there are good players on this team.
Totally.
You're going to tell coaches that they're going to get to go to one of the biggest sports markets in the world, number one,
You're
and they're going
literally
to have
in
an
New York
opportunity to try to
City.
coach, Christy Mewis, Margaret Purse, Ifeoma Onumanu. You don't have to sell yourself. So I would imagine that they're going to go through their process, but I don't know if they're going to need to cast that net as wide as people anticipate. There's going to be folks who are going to probably be reaching out to them and say, hey, how do I get in line for this process to be vetted and interviewed and so on and so forth.
So I'm going to shout out our chat right now because we are live on YouTube. Thanks everyone who's joining us live.
Are they snapping off? Are they popping off?
A lot of names in here. Lucy shouting out Carly Lloyd. She played for Gotham and retired last year. She is a part owner. Will she be a coach? I don't think yet. But also we've seen, I don't think being a part owner will deter her from coaching. I just don't think she wants to coach at this point in her career. I think she kind of wants to be on the business side of things, take a step back. I know she's gotten into golfing at this point, but I don't see her becoming the coach, but not because she's a part owner of Gotham, because hey, we saw that happen with Amanda Cromwell. She was a part owner of Angel City. She got the job at Orlando. You drop your investment with the club and you become the coach. So
part owners. What does Eli Manning got to do to get on the sidelines for Gotham FC? No, I definitely do not want to see that either. Oh, we're talking about that kind of stuff. But I'm curious. I'm curious about that direction. Yeah. I'm curious about in terms of their vetting process, who is going to be like, what are they going to be talking to their candidates about what they want to see happen with their club? What's the vision on the pitch for this team moving forward? And I think that, at the time of, we're talking about a year ago now, bringing on Parkinson, I think that was probably the top candidate for them. Yeah. This was somebody, what I'm about to go into doesn't maybe necessarily exist quite yet in the NWSL, but I'm going to start talking about like coaching trees. And we see that a lot more in other professional leagues. You could point it out in a league like the NBA. You can point it out in a league like the NFL. Coaching trees where you have like really prominent, experienced coaches, and coaching and assistant coaches or other coaches within their staff start getting vetted for like head coaching opportunities. So we're looking at somebody like Parkinson, who maybe that could have been the start of a little bit of a coaching tree in NWSL, because Parkinson is someone who's been tied to Laura Harvey in this league for quite some time, has been part of her coaching staff, in a number of teams. This is a head coach who was talked about very highly still in Utah circles, quite frankly, during the Royals days, joined up with the Chicago Red Stars in 2020. And that was an incredibly difficult year for the league, period, because we're talking about the height of the pandemic, this league having to be the first contact sport team sport back into play during the pandemic, playing in a bubble, that's a very, very high stakes emotional thing to go through with the team. And you hear everything out of Chicago from players specifically about Parkinson and the way he is as a person, the way he is as a coach. So when they made this hire, there was a lot of high praise around Parkinson, and it sort of felt like, I think you and I, when we spoke to the GM, and that was one of those things I think that she said surprised her. She's like, she knows about Bev Yanez, that's a former teammate of hers, and she was like, she was equally surprised to see all of the same amount of respect and love sort of being shown to Parkinson and in terms of the announcement as well. So she was like, I think we made the hire.
And when Parkinson came in the middle of the 2021 season, about 1 year ago, he led Gotham on a winning streak towards the end of the season. They did not lose, and they made it into the playoffs towards the end of it. Something that the New Jersey team, Sky Blue, Gotham, had not previously done and been consistent at before getting into the playoffs. So I think there is something to be said there. But it did not work out this year. Things did not pan out, and it's a mutual goodbye from both sides.
We'll see. I guess never say never. This season has a number of teams, I think, in that bottom half of the table who might have some different coaching decisions to make towards the end of the season. So we'll see if Scott Parkinson gets another shot in NWSL, but that's where we're at right now. Mutual parting of ways. Interim coach yet to be named. We both think they should hand the keys over for the rest of the season to Bev Yanez and Becky Tweed. We will see how that continues to develop. But let's touch a little bit quickly before we start previewing NWSL matches this weekend. There was a midweek match that took place just last night. We had the Washington Spirit versus Portland Thorns at Segra Field. We both chose a draw in this one, Lisa, and we were so close. You could almost taste it. I think that's how I felt when I was watching this a little bit. But the Thorns were not to be denied. 2-1 victory for Portland on the road. Tell me your thoughts of this match.
This game was nuts. The first thought that comes to mind is just absolute nuts, chaos. There was lightning in the DC area in Leesburg, Virginia, where Segra Field is. So this game automatically was off to a slow start. Fans couldn't enter the stadium. The players' warm-up was askew from the start and thrown off because of the lightning in the area. And then after Portland announced their starting lineup, it was then announced that Sophia Smith would be taken out of that starting lineup and Marissa Everett would replace her. Smith not even available throughout this match after that point. So there were so many things that happened even before the whistle blew, Sandra, that I was like, ooh, this is just nuts. NWSL after dark, midweek, nuts action. And this game gave a lot of everything. It was back and forth. We saw a lot of good soccer. Frankly, we saw Washington Spirit controlling a lot of the ball towards the beginning half of this game. We saw really great things, I think, from players like Rodman, Hatch getting 90 minutes after only playing 45 last week on the weekend. That was something we had talked about in our preview. How many minutes would Hatch get? Tara McKeown up top. There was lots of moving parts for both of these sides. And ultimately, the goals didn't start coming until after the 75th minute. And it was chaos ensued. And the way that Washington was able to get on the board first was an own goal by Bella Bigsby, Portland Thorns goalkeeper. She ends up making a great save off the line. Then she ends up catching the ball on a corner kick where there was so much pressure from Washington. She catches the ball and she ends up backpedaling just to give herself some space, not understanding her awareness on the pitch and goes right into the goal. She tries to throw it out. Hatch ends up at the insurance kick to find the back of the net, but it turns out to be an own goal. And that was something that I was like, wow, Washington just scored on an own goal after putting so much pressure on, like defensively, Aubrey Kingsbury had 4 saves. Bella Bigsby, 7 saves throughout this match. But Portland would come back, score 2 goals. Christine Sinclair getting the first one in the 84th minute. And she was hype after that goal. It was almost like a rock around, get it past Kingsbury and just find the back of the net. And then 92nd minute, so 2 minutes into the stoppage time, Morgan Weaver beautiful, beautiful shot. She's got a lot of space. She dribbles centrally and just rips it past Kingsbury, who's fully outstretched and can't save it. But this game had everything, and there was so much chaos. And if you just look at the last 15 minutes, that's not even it, because the chaos started at 7:00 before the game was even supposed to kick off, up until the time that the first whistle blew.
Impressive. Portland scored all the goals in this match. I couldn't believe what we saw kind of like unfold there with that own goal. Initially, it was just, I guess, the epitome of chaos, quite frankly. But it also sort of felt like, hey, maybe this is the type of break that this Washington Spirit could use or need at this moment. They've been on a winless streak for a very long time now. And maybe they needed something as wild and ridiculous as that to sort of happen and maybe shake things up a little bit. But as far as midweek games go, I enjoyed this one. I think sometimes they could definitely feel a little bit clogged, a little bit of a grind. And I know that in the preview, we chatted a little bit about this one being hosted by the Spirit at Seger Field and how tough of a pitch that is to play on. But again, I think one of the things that we were talking about also in the preview is just like the complete differences of, within the standings between these two teams in terms of their momentum at the moment. You've got a Spirit team that are fighting for every single point that they can get right now at this stage of the season. And you've got a Portland Thorns side that are on just incredible form right now, just on a remarkable run. I believe they have now extended their undefeated streak to double digits. I believe it's 11 at this point. That is outstanding when you're talking about like streaks, as far as streaks can go in this league. That is ridiculous. So watching them kind of put together this kind of late game run on the road, just I think is another check of the many boxes of this Portland Thorns team that makes them kind of scary to go up against right now. But while we're talking about this game and teams in the bottom half of the table, we talk a lot about Gotham right now with their breaking news, but with the Spirit, a little bit of a different energy. I mean, we talked about Gotham, off of their game, and I'm just like, I'm not seeing it. Like the body language is also equally bad on the pitch. It's just not there. And then you see this Spirit side. Like I thought Trinity Rodman had an incredible game last night. She was everywhere. And just sort of continuing to show that she's like not like in any kind of sophomore slump whatsoever, and putting together these really strong performances and also like on really quick turnarounds, so again, it's just I would imagine there's a layer of frustration there for the Spirit to not be able to find the breakthrough and get these wins, especially as their season is winding down rapidly. More than some other teams, they don't necessarily have those games in hand right now. These losses will tend to weigh heavier because of that.
Yeah, and looking at some of the numbers, you mentioned Portland's undefeated streak right now. They haven't suffered a road loss this season yet in 2022, which I think is incredibly impressive. And on the flip side of that, Washington Spirit is on a 15-game winless streak right now, which is tied for second in the NWSL for the longest winless streaks. And we talked about the numbers with Gotham. I'm going to bring them up again because they play a role in this. It's 22-game season for all of these teams, and Washington Spirit has played 16 games up until this point, last night being their 16th. And the Spirit has 12 points on this year. With 6 games left, if they win all 6 of these games, they will get 18 points, 30 points total. That's against 2 matches against Houston, San Diego, Gotham, Angel City, and Kansas City. Washington has to win out all 6 of those games. When you look at some of the other teams that are in the standings, OL Reign right now is at number 6 at the bottom of that playoff line with 21 points, and they've played 15 games. So if they win their next 3, they're at 30 points, and Washington is out. Angel City, they need 4 wins to get to 30 points, depending on where they are in the standings right now. So
and they're going to have more games to try to do that.
Washington needs to win out from here on out in order to get into the playoffs. And that's an incredibly big ask from this team. Is it possible?
Mathematically, of course. Hypothetically, not looking good. Doesn't feel good, I think, if
Not
you're
looking
on
good.
the Washington Spirit side of things, quite frankly. I mean, you've been going this long in terms of, a winless streak for as long as you've been going. It's hard to turn that around at this point, and then B, it's hard to turn it around and then say, okay, we'll just go on a 6-game win streak now, and it'll be fine.
Sure.
It's tough. Yeah.
Super tough to do. And they're traveling. It's a really tall task, but hey, we don't see Washington again until the 27th. They've got 2 weeks of a bye week. So maybe that'll be the ticket that they need.
Yeah, maybe we'll have to revisit them in a couple of weeks. Portland also not going to be playing this weekend, but there are going to be a number of teams setting up for action across this NWSL weekend slate of games. And we're going to be back with a preview of all those matches right after a quick break.
We found your daughter. She's alive.
Mister? It's Mommy. 4 years is a long time. Welcome home.
I think something's going on with Esther.
She seemed different.
Since she got back, there's constant lying. There's outbursts of anger.
Orphan First Kill, rated R, streaming August 19th on Paramount+.
All right, let's chat about some NWSL action. We've got games going from Friday through Sunday. Let's go ahead and start with Friday's match. We've got Houston Dash versus Racing Louisville. This one's kicking off at 8:30 p.m. Eastern. We chatted a little bit about the breaking news for the Houston side with Rachel Daly officially transferred to Ashton Villa FC, but she's actually going to be at this home game to say goodbye, say her farewell to fans, and go ahead and cheer the Dash one last time. And then on the Racing side of things, I guess some news for them. Their head coach recently fined coming out of the August 2nd match against Oil Reign for approaching officials during that match. So two very different types of news coming in around this team. But when it comes to this match, Lisa, who do you got and why?
So this match, you mentioned a little bit of the news there with Rachel Daly being at this match, Kim Bjorkegren getting the fine, which is frankly nothing new for coaches in the NWSL this year. But between these two sides, Houston is coming off of a monstrous 2-1 win over OL Reign at Lumen Field. The first time a team has done that, and it was the Houston side with the Golden Crown going to Ebony Salmon, who's been a player that has just been incredibly on fire for this Houston Dash side in these last couple of games. Meanwhile, Racing Louisville, they're coming off of a 1-1 tie with Washington, and they scored first in that match against Washington, but then they gave up a goal. And there's something about not being able to close out a game that Racing Louisville has just struggled with. This game being played in Houston. Houston's on an incredible tear right now where they're just winning games. There are 3 games that they've just won. Ebony Salmon doing a fantastic job. But then for this team with Rachel Daly on the sideline, I give Houston Dash the upper hand. Frankly, I think they're going to get the win, take their 3-game win streak and up that to 4, and hand Racing Louisville its first loss in 3 matches.
Louisville's been scrappy. I'll give him that. And I do wonder if we're venturing into the point of the season where, yes, mathematically, there are teams in the second half
doing a lot of math today.
Yeah, a lot of math. I was told there would be 0, and now there's a bunch.
This is why we got into sports broadcasting. Yeah, not for the math.
So I think that we're getting to the point where there's a number of teams in this second half of the table where, yes, mathematically, they're going to try to be competing for every point, every win that they can to try to push maybe for one of those lower playoff seeds, a 5th or a 6th spot potentially. But within that, if for whatever reason it starts to turn a corner and maybe those spots are a little bit further out of the reach, we start seeing the mentality shift a little bit in terms of looking at teams who are potentially playing spoiler. And we talked a little bit about that. And I said that, you feel like Orlando is one of those teams that can maybe go on a run and shock some people. and get a playoff spot. I see them more as a team as playing spoiler as well. And I think maybe I'm looking at this Louisville side and kind of putting them in a similar category as well. I don't think it's going to be during this match. I'm with you in that I think Houston has more of the pieces to get a win in this one, and I think they're going to do it. Ebony Salmon has been incredible for this Houston Dash side. She's been on a ridiculous run right now in terms of goal production for this team. I'm here for the revenge tour. It's been absolutely wild, and I want to see it in its headliner with Ebony Salmon returning to face Racing Louisville, and I want to see another big game out of this player. So I think that Houston's going to have enough here to get the win. Even if Salmon doesn't get on the scoreboard, I think just like the spirit of Rachel Daly will just sort of break through and be enough.
I was going to ask you that. Ebony Salmon, 6 goals in the last 3 games. She's coming off a brace over OL Reign. Does she score in this one?
You know what?
Can she go 4 straight games?
I think that she could. I think that what the Dash are doing right now in the league and what they've done period this year and how they've done it under the circumstances in which they've done it is going to be and is currently one of the biggest storylines out of the NWSL regular season in 2022. And I frankly don't think it's being talked about enough. I mean, we're talking about a team that parted ways with its head coach on an administrative leave just as the regular season was starting due to ongoing investigations, had an interim coach in place in Sarah Loudon, and now have a new head coach. And they are still playing the way they're playing. They have been playing without their face of the franchise and now will continue to play without her as she's officially being transferred. And they're still out there picking up wins and getting results. And they're doing it as a collective unit, which is what's most impressive from this Houston Dash side. So I see this team as, going out there, getting another result, quite frankly, trying to make some noise and contend a little bit with the Shield. I think Portland is starting to turn a little bit of a corner and maybe kind of like dig their hands a little bit, tighter around that Shield, but we'll see. Anything can happen. There's still X amount of games left, right? So I just think on the other side of things with Racing, they haven't necessarily hit that stride yet. And you and I, we've had the opportunity to talk to a number of Racing players on this podcast, and specifically younger players as well. But this is a team that's in a kind of a mixed phase right now. They have some really good experienced pieces and somebody like a Jessica McDonald or a Gemma Bonner or a Nadia Nadim, but they've also got like really, really young players that they're like working into their system and working in as professionals, whether that's a Savannah DeMello or a Jalen Howell. So it's just kind of this mixed bag a little bit right now, but they're obviously doing enough to present challenges to oppositions. And I have a feeling that this might be one of those games where there might be some of those challenges that are presented, but I just still think that the Dash are going to break through on this one. So I'm going with Houston as well.
I agree. I'm sticking with Houston.
Let's go. Let's talk about Saturday. We got a doubleheader in this one. North Carolina Courage versus Kansas City Current. This one is kicking off at 8 p.m. Eastern. Look, we've been high on the Current, Lisa. Who are you choosing in this one and why?
I mean, North Carolina is just draw after draw after draw after draw. They're coming off a 3-3 draw over Portland, 3-3 with Washington, 2-2 with Chicago. But they've scored in their last 3 games. They've scored many goals, right? 8 goals in their last 3 games, but they've also conceded just as many as that because of all these draws. Dania Ordonez, she scored a brace in the last 2 games for North Carolina. I think she's getting on the board again. We just talked about Salmon with Houston. I think Diana Ordonez scores in this one, but I still think Kansas City is going to win. They're coming off a big 2-1 win over San Diego. It could have been 3-1. They had a penalty kick that was saved by Kaylin Sheridan. Kansas City is just unstoppable right now. They're on a great 9-game undefeated streak at this point, and I think that continues to 10. I give Kansas City the win.
Okay, so we're going down with that. I'm not going to lie. I was going back and forth with this one in terms of draws because North Carolina has showed us that it's tough for them to win. But if there's one thing they can do, they can squeak out a draw, and they can do that against upper half table competition, and not just any old tired draws. We're talking about like wild, high scoring type of draw. So I was going a little bit back and forth in this one, curious about if this was the game where the two teams kind of match up well against each other, and that ultimately that could lead to something like a draw between these two sides. But Kansas City is on a really good run themselves right now in terms of their form. I really like what we're seeing out of CeCe Kaiser as each week goes by. She gets a little bit more acclimated to this team as they made a move for her kind of mid-season there during that trade window. But more than that, I'm also really liking Elise Bennett, not refusing to not go a game without making some sort of impact. And it's kind of been in this bit of a off the bench kind of role, right? But that hasn't seemed to slow her down, which is what has impressed me most about her game. So I'm a little curious as to, a number of things in this match. The personnel that's going to be available. I know with the Courage, it's been a little hit or miss in terms of personnel that have been available for games for them. And I do wonder if something like a home field advantage for the Courage is something that even exists for them right now. I think maybe in terms of like the concept of like, hey, you don't have to travel, you get to stay, like sleep in your own bed, and you just got to like focus on training for the game. But I don't know if I think of the Courage and then playing at home and Cary this year as something where it's like a tough place for opposition to play. So I'm looking at a Kansas City side to kind of come in here and continue their form. I'm also going with Kansas City in this match. And I would really like to see maybe another breakout game from Kristen Hamilton. I think she's due for one, quite frankly, and there's nothing like going up against your own club. So I hope she has a big day for Kansas City in this match. Let's talk about the next one, Lisa. We've got San Diego Wave FC versus Orlando Pride to close things out on Saturday, 10:30 p.m. Eastern. I don't know. You've been high on the Pride, Lisa. Who you got in this one?
I have been high on Orlando Pride. I mean, they're just at a point right now in the season. They're coming off 3 ties, right? But before that, they had a win and then a couple more ties in there. But San Diego is coming off of their first loss. This match is in San Diego. It'll be in California, Orlando having to travel for this one. But between these two sides, despite Orlando playing spoiler at this point in the season, going up against this number 2 ranked San Diego Wave team that has put together incredible games over the last couple of weeks. They've really come together as a team, found that passing pattern, been able to possess the ball with a purpose. Now, the losses that they're coming off of against Kansas City most recently, and then a really tight win over Chicago that was perhaps a bit lucky for San Diego. Have they hit a slump at this point in the season at the same time that Orlando has hit this next gear where they can kind of power through, keep going? I think this is where it stops or maybe gets put into place for Orlando. I have San Diego winning this match, but I'm looking for some goals, maybe a 2-1, a 3-2 in this match, but I still give San Diego the win over Orlando. What about you? Who are you going with? You got the Wave, the Pride in this one at Torreo Stadium.
Look, the San Diego Wave have made Torreo their home. They're going to be pivoting pretty soon to Snapdragon, but it's been a tough place for oppositions to play the Wave against, for sure. But, Orlando Pride, I think, have been showing that they can kind of play that spoiler a little bit. And we were talking about that as recently as our previous episode last Monday. Can't remember, but soon, recent episode. But I do wonder if the same argument in terms of hitting a plateau can be made for San Diego, quite frankly. This is a team that has had some, we'll just call them like kind of interesting results over their last, recent matches. We're talking about coming off of a 2-1 loss, against Kansas City. We're talking about a very narrow win over Chicago Red Stars that was incredibly physical, and kind of maybe started to show some crowd. We're talking about a 0-0 draw against Racing Louisville before that. Can a similar argument be made for the Wave right now in terms of their season and where they're at right now? I think possibly. I think we could take a look at this team and say, hey, maybe they're sort of hitting a certain point of the season where perhaps they're starting to feel the grind of that season, which is something that we talked about very, very early on in the offseason when we were doing our really way too early power rankings and stuff like that. Like, how are these expansion teams going to look in the long regular season type of grind?
Mm-hmm.
Very, it's a different beast when you're going through something like a Challenge Cup and you're just like very, very quick, kind of preseason-y still. But that very long, lengthy grind of a season can take a toll on you at times, and you kind of hit the ebbs and the flows. And I'm wondering if right now this is the case for San Diego. So I just think that while Orlando is doing a good job of being able to play spoiler at times, kind of having those like second half surges specifically where they kind of really are taking it to teams and kind of forcing the issue, I'm not too sure if this backline is ready to sort of contain Alex Morgan, contain somebody like an Amir Ali, who I desperately want to see get more time on the pitch for this San Diego Wave side. I think this is a game that is tailor-made for a player like Ali. So I hope that she gets some significant time in this one. I think she can maybe do some damage. We'll see. And if she does, I think they'll pick up the win. So I'm going with the Wave in this one.
Nice.
Let's talk about it some more. We got 2 more games to go through. Sunday's matches, OL Reign versus Gotham FC. This one kicking off at 3 p.m. Eastern. Lisa, is this the shakeup where we see the shock?
No, I'm going to be frank. No, OL Reign's going to win this match. But Gotham, I think, could play differently, right? Like we don't really know what's happening in their coaching right now, because Scott Parkinson has mutually agreed to part ways with the club in Gotham FC. But for this match being played at Lumen Field, and for both of these sides, Gotham's coming off 3 straight losses. OL Reign's coming off a loss and a tie. Their last loss against Houston was very big deal at Lumen Field. I don't think Laura Harvey lets that happen again. I don't think OL Reign go 2 for 2 losing at home. But Megan Rapinoe coming off a big goal, her first goal of the year for OL Reign in this match. We're seeing a lot of consistency from OL Reign at this point. They've now lost Kim Little. She's no longer with the club anymore. She went back to Arsenal. So that definitely changes things in terms of their attacking presence and what they can do. But for Gotham, they can't possess the ball. They're so defensive minded. They can't move forward down the pitch. And I don't think that changes in 3 days time, right? The announcement was made about Scott Parkinson leaving today. Perhaps the assistants took over training today. They've got training Friday and then a little bit of travel. And before you know it, it's Sunday and they're playing OL Reign. I don't think it's enough time to implement a new system, a new mindset in this Gotham team. And Mitch Purse with 3 goals on the season for Gotham, that's probably it, right? And if OL Reign can contain her defensively, which I think defensively OL Reign does a tremendous job. Besides Fallon Tullis-Joyce in goal, they've got Huerta, they've got Lou Barnes. They're just a team that can do so well defensively that it won't really be a match for Gotham in this match. I have Reign winning it.
Yeah, I'm with you. I don't know if this is a weekend where I'm choosing a draw just because we've got the 5 games to go through. And also just, again, we're getting to this point of the season where you're looking at heavyweights versus, some teams that are kind of struggling at the moment. And Gotham is probably the definition of that this season. And I don't imagine that the Reign, who are on a little bit of a winless streak of their own, if you're looking at 2 games, they've got that 1-1 draw against Racing and kind of rolled that into that 2-1 loss against Houston. I would imagine that they want to get back in that win column. And I think if you're looking at this game, you're looking at the opposition that you're facing. Listen, this is pro sports. This is soccer at one of its highest level. There is nothing wrong with a team that has a ton of talent on it looking at another team and saying, that's a team we could take it to and beat. There's no disrespect in that at all, as
Yeah.
far as I'm concerned. So I hope that the Reign had this one on their radar and looking at it and saying, like, this is the game where we can absolutely get some goals in this game and maybe try to work some things out in this. I mean, this is a team that we've seen all season put up some kind of wild numbers in terms of total crosses in or total shots, and sometimes walk away with very narrow score lines. So maybe this is a game where they not only get a win, but they also get perhaps a multi-goal game in this one. I think that's something that they would like to close out their weekend on, because this is a team that's going to also be participating in the Women's Cup. So you want to handle your business, get all 3 points before you participate in a certain type of exhibition caliber level type of competition. So I'm going with Old Reign in this one as well. I'd like to see a Jess Fishlock banger. We'll see, but that's the other thing too.
Yes.
Who's going to be available? Who's going to be available for this match? Maybe not so much in Old Reign, but also Gotham as well. I mean, they had a very hefty injury report going into that Chicago match. Things like COVID, general illness, keeping players out. Who's going to be available for Gotham? I'm not too sure. We'll find out once those reports dropped. But we've got the last one to go through here. Maybe one of the more interesting matches of the weekend, just because it's going to be the first time for these two teams going head to head. Angel City FC are going to host Chicago Red Stars Sunday at 8 p.m. Eastern. You got a winner in this one, Lisa?
I honestly see this one as my draw for the weekend. I know you kind of just touched on there may not be a draw for either of these sides. Angel City, Chicago, this is my draw that I've been saving until the end of this conversation, the end of this episode. This game being played at the Bank in California. For Angel City, a home match, it definitely means something to them. But they're coming off midweek match as well against Tigres Femenil. So it was their first international match for Angel City. And because of that, just kind of how Angel City's been flowing, they're 2 winless back-to-back. Chicago is coming off of a very big win that they just had over Gotham, 2 goals where they just dominated the entirety of that game. And something for Angel City that they've been struggling with this year is closing out games, right? Before they beat Tigres Wednesday, in this midweek international match for Angel City. They're coming off of a 2-2 tie over Orlando Pride, in which Orlando was able to come back and score, put pressure on in stoppage time at the end of that game and force Angel City into an own goal situation. It was unlucky perhaps, but also incredibly lucky for Orlando and well-deserved in terms of what they were able to do. Before that, 3-2 loss for Angel City over OL Reign in a game that Angel City scored first. They were up 2-0, and then they concede 3 goals in the second half of this match. So I think this is a point in the season for Angel City, Freya Kuhn, that they almost need to take a reset, right? Like, look at this week ahead of them, the match that they're playing against Chicago, a team that is very good right now. Chicago is unstoppable in terms of their defense and what they can do to keep the ball out of the net for their opponents, but also scoring goals. We've seen Ava Cook step up. Of course, Mallory Pugh step up, but the players for Chicago are there. It's just a matter of now, can they do it against Angel City? And I think it'll end up being a draw at the end of this one, perhaps a 1-1. I'll give them each a goal, but
I respect it. I think if there is the makings of a draw in any of the games this weekend, that this is a good one to choose that. I mean, I think it's not necessarily a midweek match for the Red Stars. Technically, it is for Angel City with the quick turnaround, But also, these are 2 teams that haven't faced each other yet, so there's some unfamiliarity there on both sides of the pitch going into this game, and sometimes that can lead to some maybe disjointed soccer, maybe physical soccer, and it doesn't end in like a really high score line, right? So I think there are makings of a potential draw in this one. But I don't know. Maybe I'm still like feeling the hot streak of Vegas here, and I want to just pick winners and losers. I think when we're looking at this, when we're looking at current form, right? And you brought up a really good point about this Angel City side. They're a team that we've seen kind of shut it off a little bit towards the end of games, and that has sort of come back to bite them. I think we also have to take a look at personnel that's available for this match, which again, we're unclear on that because the availability reports haven't dropped for the Sunday games quite yet. But I think if you have somebody like a Sydney Leroux that's available, a Claire Emsey, I think that these are players that can present some real headaches for this backline in Chicago that are kind of hitting a reset button themselves. You know, Aaron Wright has been slotted in as a defensive back out of necessity. Quite frankly, they've had to deal with injury back there, and they've had a number of very young players tasked with the responsibility of trying to sustain the attacks from some really good, experienced offensive lines here in the league. But again, long grind of a season, right? You can't, how often can you rely on that? So they've shifted some more experienced player in that role as well. And we saw it work out a little bit. You know, Aaron Wright kind of keeping somebody like Alex Morgan as a non-threat, but that opened things up in other areas. So I do wonder if there's room here for somebody like a June Endo to have herself a day against the Chicago Red Stars 3-back, or somebody like a Sydney Leroux to have herself a day against the Chicago Red Stars, because if there's someone who's pretty good at scoring against Chicago Red Stars, it's actually Sydney Leroux. So I'm a little bit curious as to how that's going to look. Are the Red Stars going to continue their streak of scoring off set pieces? We'll see. They're going to have to try to earn them in this one. I really do think this will be one of the more fun matches, one of the more intriguing matches, again, because of the first time against these two teams. But this is also Chicago's beginning of a really lengthy road trip for themselves as well. And it's going to start in a place that is very difficult to play. So perhaps maybe they'll feed off of that energy, you know, but I'm going to go with the Red Stars. They too themselves like to play spoiler sometimes. I'm going to go with Chicago in this one.
I like it.
Say that Alyssa Nair has herself a game in this one. So that's that on all the matches. We get to come back and see if we were right or see if we were wrong and talk all about that as well. Thank you all so much for joining us here at Attacking Third. Thanks to everybody who's voted for us. A reminder to check your email to see if you've been chosen to vote for Attacking Third in the final round. We're on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Stitcher, anywhere you listen to your shows. We're also available as videos. Subscribe at youtube.com/Attacking Third. Now we'll be back with more. For Sandra Herrera and Lisa Roman, this was Attacking Third.